Continuing with the comment on 84 of chapter 3, it is incomparably annoying to see this word alas at the head of this verse as a pure oxymoron with the rest of the text. It is stupid, unseeing selfishness so firmly fixed in the nature of man that even at this height he still laments? Do not believe it. It is interesting here to note that the view taken by himself who has actually obtained the grade of magus, he says, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. It may be those 3 perfections of my Sembhogakaya robe. But the fact is that one has reached a stage when the path becomes almost meaningless. The illusion of sorrow has been exposed so ruthlessly that one can hardly realize that one or anyone else can ever have been in such a silly muddle. It seems so perfectly natural that everything that should be just as it is, and so right that one is quite startled if one contemplates the nature of one's star, which led one into these grave paths. The only wrong is the thinking about anything at all. This is, of course, the old thought is evil on a higher plane. One gets to understand the Upanishad, which tells us how the original, it made the error of contemplating itself, of becoming self-conscious, as one also perceives the stupendous transcendentalism concealed in the phrase of the Book of the Law, "Enough of because, be he damned for a dog." This universe, the Eopan, the Oimoi, Talanoi, too, is a play of Our Merry Lady. It is as natural to have all this heavy stuff about the weary pilgrim's bleeding feet and the candidate for woe and all that as it is for Theseus and Hippolyta to decide that Pyramus and Thisbe may amuse them. The public will kindly excuse the magus if he be of a nature and in a mood to decline to take the tragedy too seriously and to mock the crude buffooneries of Bottom. Perhaps it would be better taste in him to draw the curtains of his box, but it is at least his pleasure to reward the actors. Love is law, love under will. Surely a better image would have been the mother, and does the mother complain or rejoice? It is also a bad image. This of the snow, it is snow in any way incommented by the biting frosts, the northern blasts. And 86 has already been commented upon through otherwise. 87. Here indeed is the only sorrow that could seem, even for a moment, likely to touch the adept. It is rather annoying that the great prize offered so freely to men is scorned by them, but it is this only if the adept fall for one moment to the narrower view, accept the conventional outlook on the universe. If only he remember that the very simple and elementary instruction that the magician must work as if he had omnipotence at his command and eternity at his disposal, he will not repine. Verse 88 introduces the climax of the treatise. It is not at all clear to what stage of the path this refers. In verse 91 it appears to refer to the dhyana path, but the dhyana path has been described in entirely different terms in verses 71 to 73, and it is certainly a quite bad description of the condition of Sratapati. I think the tragic note is struck for effect. Damn all these tortures and rewards. Has Narjal no manhood at all? Here it is, again, a totally un-Buddhistic description. It seems to me rather a paraphrase of the well-known sweeping through the gates of the New Jerusalem, washed in the blood of the Lamb. Again, the confusion of the attainment of the student with regard to spiritual experience and his attainment with regard to his grade. There is confusion between these, but it is not a close and invariable one. A man might get a quite hot samadhi and still be many lives away from Sratapati. From here from verse 92 to 95 is a description of this last path, which heads to the last gate. Here again is apparently a serious difficulty. The idea of klesha, here, identified with love of worldly enjoyment, seems to put one back almost before the beginning. It is now only that the almost arhat no longer wants to go to theater, and must not be interpreted in this low sense. At the same time, it is difficult to discover a sense high enough to fit the passage. With tanha, it is easier to find a meaning, for Madam, it seems to identify tanha with the creative force of which we have spoken, but this is, of course, incompatible with the Buddhist teaching on the subject. Tanha is properly defined as the hunger of the individual for continuous personal existence, either in a material or a spiritual sense. With regard to the rest of this verse, it certainly reads as if yet Blavatsky had taken the sword to a Gordian knot by saying that compassion is no attribute. She is merely asserting what is evidently not true, and she therefore defines it in a peculiar way, and I'm afraid she does so in a somewhat misleading manner. It would be improper here to disclose what is presumably the true meaning of this verse. One can only commend it to the earnest consideration of members of the sanctuary of the Gnosis, the 9th degree of the OTO. Verse 94 throws a little further light upon its predecessor. Compassion is really a certain Chinese figure whose names are numerous. One of them is Baphomet. Verse 95 closes the subject. Here, however, we come upon the question of the final renunciation. It is undoubtedly true that one may push spiritual experience to the point of complete attainment without ever undertaking the work of a Dhamma Buddha, though it seems hard to believe that at no period during that progress will it have to become clear that the complete path is downwards as well as upwards. Here, once more, we perceive the ignorance of the author with reference to all matters of mystical terminology, an ignorance which would have been amusing, indeed, had she hived 10 years hater. A bodhisattva is simply a being which is culminated in the Buddha. If you or I became Buddhists tomorrow, then all our previous incarnations were bodhisattvas, and therefore, as there shall not be a single grain of dust which shall not attain to Buddhahood, every existing thing is in a way a bodhisattva, but of course, in practice, the term is confined to the special incarnations of the only Buddha of whom we have any such record. It is therefore ridiculous to place Srotapati as a soul of inferior grade to Bodhisattva. Buddha did not become a Srotapati until 7 incarnations before he attained to Buddhahood. You know, the Jyoti text? What are those things called? The last part of this verse, and the long note of which we quote the gist, are nonsense to describe complete Buddhism as an ideal breath, consciousness merged in the universal consciousness. Our soul, devoid of every attribute, is not Buddhism at all, and is quite incompatible with Buddhism. Again, we ascend to the anticlimax of a somewhat mawkish sentimentality. Again, we find the mistake of duality, of that opposition between self and others, which, momentarily destroyed even in the most elementary periods of samadhi, is completely wiped out by progress through the grades. The path would indeed be a treadmill if one always remained in this salvation mode. The anticlimax is now complete. Knowledge is by no means the last step. Knowledge has been finished with even by the master of the temple, and all this question of wedding woe remains unselfish till the endless end, is but poetic bombast based upon misconception, as it is as puerile as the crude conceptions of the many Christian sects. Here, however, we get something like real poetry, and this, and not the pija, should be taken as the key of this masterpiece. Love is the law, love under will. And so, what do we have represented there? We have all the stations that are shown through the trunks. And we have, so the fool is, okay, part of the path, and whether it's ascending or descending, Nokian authors have this ascending and descending sort of thing too. The path is not it. What we thought of ourselves isn't quite just it. And would that be air, and that be earth, and water, fire, spirit? So we have a little bit of everything. The character types that we have shown aren't quite as well known, I don't think, but you know. So the fool isn't at an insult. But you can say, oh, well, what if he's kept down by the crocodile and the tiger? And in some cases you have a dog or his staff, or, you know, so he's beyond the plan. In the magician card, the guy has the plan. But, you know, the fool, you know, covers. The fool is the representative.